the day after Thanksgiving. I'm shocked you're awake if you are. I'm shocked, actually, I'm awake after the amount of turkey and food I ate. And the dressing, not stuffing, David, as you mentioned earlier.
Oh, he's
the
learning.
Big difference. We got to understand the difference in that. But we are very excited to be joined by our special guest picker this week. You can obviously tell where his allegiances lie. There's a big game in Ann Arbor this weekend. You can catch him on the Steve Deace show on Blaze TV. He's a two-time best-selling author, executive producer of a hell of a movie, Nefarious.
Yes, sir.
One that I really, really enjoyed. Our good friend, Steve Deace. Steve, what's up, man?
Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Hope you enjoyed the meal. Got plenty of turkey, plenty of pumpkin. You know, I'm big on that. And let's talk some ball, guys. I'm excited.
Let's do it. Well, there's a pumpkin or a carriage that may turn into a pumpkin at midnight for either one of Michigan or Ohio State, because I only think one team is coming out of the Big Ten. But before we get into the picks, obviously we got a mix of some games today on Friday, and then the big games, as I consider them, the rivalry games outside of the Civil War on Saturday. But when you look at this Michigan situation, and we've talked about it, Steve, ad nauseum, obviously it's one of the biggest stories in the sport, but we haven't been able to talk to you about it. Just tell our audience, with the Jim Harbaugh, Connor Stallions, sign stealing. I coached for 9 years, 6 at the Division I level. If we wanted your signals, we were going to get them, whether that was through the wide tape that we got, whether it was in the game. This is something that goes on. It's gamesmanship. To me, it's much to do about nothing, and it seems like kind of a petty you stole my girl situation from the NCAA to Jim Harbaugh. Just what are your thoughts on the whole deal?
You know, I think Harlan Barnett, Michigan State's interim coach, I think pretty much summed it up for all of us last week when, after the Indiana game, he congratulated Indiana on stealing their signals. And then when the media was aghast, he then said, they did it the right way. This entire thing has been the dumbest, fakest, weakest, most effeminate controversy, I think, in the history of college football. I cannot imagine any school in the SEC would allow their coach to be suspended for half a season without a single letter of inquiry or notice of allegations from the NCAA. I mean, this thing has been incredibly mismanaged by Michigan this entire time. And just when it seemed like they were actually going to go through puberty here, and their voice would change, and maybe their balls would drop, they decided to put them back in a jar again this past week and surrender. I mean, this entire thing is just beyond ridiculous. We're not even, no one can even point me to the rule that was broken. The rule that is cited here is not against stealing signs. It's a 30-year-old rule dealing with budgetary concerns. It was almost repealed in 2021. It doesn't define what scouting is, doesn't even define who a scout is. With today's technology, as Dave Portnoy pointed out, I could go to the stands, just film someone's signs, put them up online, or send them to somebody in a program I know. Am I now a scout? This entire thing is dumb. Hearing Matt Rule, the Nebraska coach, well, you know, we had a tough schedule. We even had to play a team that scouted us. You lost 52-7. Bob Devaney's coming back from the grave to pimp slap you for being such a wimp. Goodness, I mean, this is just beyond pathetic, and it's been, forget what you think of the teams. This is just a sad state of American masculinity. Give me Woody Hayes slugging players in the throat. All right, give me Alabama, Auburn, and Tennessee literally just going to auctions with players and turning each other in when they get outbid. Those are things worthy of this great sport, not this cockamamie, effeminate crap.
Man, I absolutely love it, Steve. And I want to do you one better. Not only would an SEC institution individually not allow this to happen, Greg Sankey would not allow this to happen from the NCAA. Correct. And I think they took advantage of a young commissioner in Tony Petitti that's kind of caught in no man's land. And I want to give guys the benefit of the doubt, but the NCAA, without any hard evidence, notice of allegation, Greg Sankey would have laughed them out of the room, but they don't have the balls to approach the emperor, the czar of college football, which I think if we do get a college football commission, he's going to be the one that runs it in Greg Sankey. So I want to add that. And I also want to add one more thing. If you think stealing signals is like the down and dirty way, you should see the tendencies and the spreadsheets that teams have on other teams when they line up in certain personnel groupings, in certain formations, on certain sides of the field. I could tell you that 55% of the time you were running an exact play if you were on the left hash or in the left middle, if you were in 12 personnel and you got up and you got in ace and the back was offset or anything like that. It's so much more in depth. People don't understand how it really works because they don't know how the sausage is made and what goes on in their cone. I just think it's ridiculous.
I never thought I'd see a more ridiculous sports punishment than when Tom Brady was suspended 4 games for liking the football slightly deflated. But this certainly is giving that a run for its money. But Steve, say what you will about what the rules are and what they should be. Michigan did self-impose the suspension for the first 3 games, and they did at least acknowledge and adhere to these last 3 games for a suspension for Jim Harbaugh. So he will not be on the sidelines for the biggest rivalry in college football. How many points do you think that is worth? You and I have talked about Sharon Moore and when he's had to be the head coach and the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach for these 3 games. How do you think this will play out without having him on the sidelines?
Well, guys, I would imagine teams hire 3 different people to do those jobs because they're not easy. And so having one guy do all 3 of them when you've got to make decisions in 100th of a second on a consistent basis throughout a game, I mean, the numbers just tell the story. I mean, Michigan's 3 most anemic offensive yardage outputs of the year were the 3 games that Sharon Moore was head coach, offensive coordinator, and O-line coach. The best they did was 312 total yards in those 3 games. All right, now you can throw Penn State out because it's an outlier. That's still a great defense and it's a tough environment. Fine, but they weren't great against Bowling Green. They weren't great last week. At least they started off great. Maybe they lost focus. I don't know. But you look at J.J. McCarthy's QBR. In those 3 games, his QBR is 55.9. The rest of the year, it is 91.2 in the other 3 games. All right. And so that's a pretty stark contrast for sure. And so at the very least, I think that it does point to JJ's performance, having that sounding board there. I mean, you can go back and look at plays from the 80s of Jim Harbaugh in a Michigan uniform and overlap them with JJ McCarthy. They're like clones. I mean, this could literally be a father and son kind of an MO, and they have that kind of a relationship from what I am told as well. So I do think it's a factor. Now, if you know anything, though, about this rivalry, the history of this rivalry has often been, it sometimes has been called a 1-game season. That whatever went on the previous 11 weeks, whatever went on the previous week, you go back to last year, Michigan was lucky to beat Illinois, and then went out to Columbus and named the score. I'm not sure. Does anybody know what sign we stole for tackle Donovan Edwards? Do you know what signal we stole for that one? Okay. And I go back to 2018. That was an Ohio State team embroiled in a lot of controversy with Urban Meyer. He was suspended. Get down to the end of the year. Will he return? Will he come back? Michigan was favored in that game. Ohio State should have lost to Maryland the week before on the road. Guy just dropped a 2-point conversion, and then Michigan would have won the division without even playing that game. The next week, Michigan goes out there and Ohio State names the score and puts up a 60 burger. So, I mean, the history of this rivalry has been that what you saw the previous 11 weeks does not necessarily, or even the previous week, does not necessarily translate to what you will see on that Saturday. If we would have done this a year ago at this time, who would have said J.J. McCarthy's going to go Drew Henson in Columbus and play the best game of his career without Blake Corum? No one would have predicted that, and that's exactly what occurred.
Yeah.
No. Well, yeah, I agree. We can sit up here and talk about Michigan till our faces turn blue. But one thing I want to know from you right now, if you had to look at the Heisman, Jaden Daniels, over 3,500 yards passing, over 1,000 yards rushing, 36 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. They do have 3 losses, and you see the defense that they put out. Bo Nix absolutely putting up gaudy numbers as well. Right now, I'm just saying right now, at the end of the year, Oregon's going to go to the Pac-12 championship, so Bo Nix will have somewhat of a leg up on Jane Daniels, but Jane Daniels will have a game against A&M. Who do you think will be deserving? All right. Do you think it's the guy who's had the best year, the best player this year, or the guy who's the best player on the best team who finishes out in the conference championship?
Well, it's so college football that the most coveted individual award in American team sport is so nebulous in defining its qualifications for winning.
Hey, wait till you see NIL. Yeah.
Right.
You think that's nebulous? Wait till you see NIL.
most outstanding player can mean all the things that you just mentioned, or an amalgamation of them. If we're not there yet, we are reaching the point where Jaden Daniels puts up the Lamar Jackson, Andre Ware kind of numbers, that it almost doesn't matter that his team is not a top 10 team, because the numbers are just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, he's averaging more yards per game than something like 60 teams in college football are averaging right now. Okay. If you look at Bo Nix, though, if I had to, I went out and bought Bo Nix at 17-1 to win the Heisman the week before the Washington game, because I figured if they won that game, his odds the next week were going to be cut in half at least. Yep. And so I'm sitting on a nice ticket where that's concerned. I've actually got Jaden Daniels at like 25-1. I bought that in the preseason. Wow. But I think Bo Nix, if they went out and they avenge the loss against Oregon, and he keeps putting up the efficiency numbers. I mean, he's putting up Joe Burrow like efficiency numbers right now. When you look at the completion percentage and everything else, I think he will end up winning it, because his numbers will be close enough to Jaden's, and he'll have the season accomplishments on top of it. And then we'll all sit back in 10 years and we'll marvel at the Big Ten Network's retrospective of Big Ten Heisman Trophy winner Bo Nix from back before he was actually even in the league.
That's exactly right. It's like we said in SEC country. Whatever Texas does this year, now that they're the only ones in it, we will accept that as our own, as the SEC doing that exact same factor.
Well,
the decade that they averaged only 7 wins a year, that's when they were in the Big 12.
Yeah, that's exactly
100%. Now, they did that in the SEC.
Welcome to it. Welcome to it.
Steve really gets it.
If you're a sports gambler, we're going to offer you cannot pass on DraftKings Sportsbook. You need to download the app right now. Use our code BOOSTER, BOOSTER, because new customers can bet $5 on the NFL Thanksgiving action. That's today to score $150 instantly in bonus bets, only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, with code BOOSTER, BOOSTER. Remember, with DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours.
All right, talking about Bo Nix, let's go ahead and pick our top 5 matchups of the weekend. We're going to start with a Friday night matchup when Oregon State, 8-3, goes to Oregon, 10-1. Everything we just talked about, Bo Nix, the Heisman Trophy's on the table. They have a chance to make the conference championship, possibly avenge that very close loss on the road against Washington. Jake, start us.
Well, I always say versatility is the best tility since fertility. And when I look at Oregon, this is a team that plays complementary football in all 3 phases. They're also good up front on both sides of the ball. Oregon State is a team that wants to get downhill. They want to run play action with DJU because they don't trust him in the pass game to be able to throw him to wins. That's not who he is. He's basically the Joe Milton of the Pac-12, a guy that doesn't make the routine throws. He'll make a great throw every now and then. But if you shut down the run, you shut down Oregon State. Multiple times this year, Oregon State's given up a lot of points to teams that they shouldn't. I think the defense has kind of underperformed this year. And you look at the way the standards have been raised at Oregon State. If I'm talking about they doing what they're doing this year, and they've underperformed on defense. I love Bucky Irving. I don't think he gets enough talk when we look at Oregon, but I love Oregon up front. I just think this is an awful matchup for Oregon State, similar to Kentucky and Georgia. I love Oregon at the -13.5. I think they roll on this one. It's at home and got a lot of momentum for the rematch against Washington, unless Dan Lanning just takes the most drastic option every time that keeps Oregon State in the game. Don't do stupid things, Dan Lanning. He's the guy he's The Rock and Samuel L. Jackson from the other guys at the top of the building. Instead of just walking down the stairs, you want to aim for the bushes every time on 4th and 3. For the love of God, Dan, just walk down the stairs and walk out the front door. You'll win this game and have a chance.
Give me that cheese, Danny.
Lane, any chance for an upset?
No, I don't think so. I think styles make fights, and I don't think Oregon State's got the right style to beat an Oregon team. The more you look at Dan Lanning and this Oregon team, what does it start to look like on defense? It's starting to look like an SEC defense. You look at that D-line, not only their starters, but the depth they have. Bo Nix is playing some of the best football I've ever seen him play. He's calm, cool, and collected in the pocket. And you have Franklin, who's a 6'5", Groot-looking receiver who's probably going to be a first-day draft pick in the NFL. I like Oregon. This game opened at 11.5. It's sitting at 13.5. I don't think that's enough. I don't think DJU's good enough to throw Oregon State to a win. Give me the Ducks and the cover.
Steve, does Oregon hold serve?
So I'm big. I'm a big situational handicapper, and this would typically be a situation I'd be all over. Could very well be Oregon State's last chance at Oregon for the foreseeable future. With Oregon's departure, the chance for little brother to destroy Big Brother's season dreams. The last week of the year is just that is a story that's been told many times in college football. But The problem with that situation is last year, Oregon
Yes.
State just absolutely depanted Oregon and embarrassed them. They ran for something like 835 yards in that game. I just lined it up and just emasculated them. And so Oregon at least has some emotional chip on its shoulder now to respond to little brother. And so I think the situations kind of cancel out. And now it just becomes about the talent on the field. I'm a little nervous at 13.5. If it was 14, I'd probably take little brother with a backdoor cover. I'll go ahead and take Oregon at 13.5, but I wouldn't be confident. That's a number that just screams backdoor cover to me.
Yeah, very well said, Steve. I'm going to complete the clean sweep here. I'm going to go with Oregon, mostly because the Oregon-Washington matchup this season, I wasn't satisfied once. I want to see it twice. All right, let's
Get
move
that
on.
cheese, Danny.
Yeah, cheese, Danny.
Florida's going to host Florida State. Florida State still unbeaten, but it's a battle of the backup quarterbacks here. Kind of unfortunate from that standpoint, Jake, but still a lot on the line for the Seminoles.
Yeah, man, I feel like Will Ferrell in old school, man, when it comes to what happened to Graham Mertz and Jordan Travis, man. We was robbed. This is going to be a really good quarterback match. Graham Mertz has been one of the biggest surprises to me in a positive light from coming from Wisconsin and what I saw last year and what he's been able to do at Florida, even when Florida hasn't had a great run game. You know, this last time I saw it was at 6.5. Florida was plus 6.5 at home. It may have changed since then. Tate Rodemaker does have more experience than Max Brown. This is going to be a game, and we say this multiple times, and it's the truth. Most teams lose games, they don't win them. You're going to see a lot of quick screens. You'll see a lot of run game. You'll see shots down the field, off play action. Rodemaker has a little more experience, but here's the difference. Florida may have Pearsall, and he's nice, and I like the backs that they have. But Florida State still got Johnny the Giraffe Wilson. They got Keon Coleman. They got Jaheim Bell. They've got a good run game with Benson, and Rodemaker can move around. At the end of the day, you could turn a 50-50 ball into a 70-30 ball. I think Florida State does it a little bit more. I'd buy this one up to Florida plus 7.5, and I think Florida State wins in a low-scoring game, couple of big plays, but I think Florida covers at home with Max Brown at quarterback.
I'm going with the Gators on this one.
Yeah?
I think Florida pulls out the win. And look, I know you have Keon Coleman and all these great athletes over at Florida State, and I know that. But the one thing Florida State has struggled with somewhat this year is stopping the run. That's one thing I think Billy's going to have a big day against this game. You look at it, you have Montreal Johnson, Trevor Etienne. You have two pieces that can really get north and south and get to sideline quickly. I think they hit some big plays with Pearsall. I think Florida plays a little bit better defense than we expected, kind of switched it up a little bit. They do bring the pressure of this game. They force some mistakes. Give me the Gators outright.
Steve, Florida needs this one to be bowl eligible.
I think there'll be two edges here for Florida State situationally. I like what's called the injured player theory, that you jump on a team right after they lose their star player, that first game afterwards, the emotion of proving to people, hey, we're not done yet, and then reality sets in ensuing weeks. I think you'll see some of that. We've seen Tate Rodemaker come in off the bench and play, including in some tough road environments. I think he'll be at least competent. And I think the other situation is I think there's a really good chance, we don't know this at the time we are taping this, but there's a really good chance the playoff committee is going to bump Florida State to 5 and put Washington there. And I think that's some added extra motivation for Florida State, understanding everybody is waiting for them to faceplant now to leave them out of the playoff. And the best unit on the field is still the weapons on the outside for Florida State. You don't have to be a great quarterback to just throw it up to Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. You have to be a great quarterback to just throw tunnel screens. And I think they'll hit enough of those plays and get the win and barely cover the spread 7 to 10 points.
If Graham Mertz was playing in this game, I would take Florida at home with the motivation of trying to get bowl eligible for that 6th win. But the fact that they're playing a backup quarterback as well, I'm going to stick with Florida State. I think if they fall, it'll be in that matchup with Louisville.
I want to make a point about something that Blaine said. Blaine, I know me and you kind of disagree on this sometimes. I would not bring pressure if I was Florida against Florida State, because if I'm bringing pressure, I am skinny on the back end. I am trying to keep Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman out of one-on-one situations. If you're going to beat me, if Tate Rodemaker is going to beat me, you're going to have to beat me in the intermediate game, proving to me that you can throw to somebody. That's where Jaheim Bell, I think, could come in for Florida State if Florida plays back. So you got to mix it up. You never want to always do the same thing. But the last thing I would do against a quarterback, even though Tate does have experience, saw him against Louisville last year. They did lose to Jacksonville State, I believe, with Tate at quarterback. I'm not pressuring them. You're going to have to go 9, 10, 11, 12 plays down the field and prove to me you can score it in the red zone with somebody else.
Well, I mean, or you can sit back there and let Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson pick you apart. And Florida loves to run zone. So those guys will find those zones. I want to see see if this kid knows how to handle pressure. That's what I want to see. I don't think he's been in this environment yet. So if you do bring heat at him, I'm not saying all the time, you just blitz 99% of the time, but you do mix it up and you pressure this kid. Look, you can still double Keon Coleman and bring pressure at the same time. I want Johnny Wilson to beat me before I want Keon Coleman to beat me. Pressure is an opportunity. I think Florida needs to get in his face early. That's what I think the Gators are going to do, and let's really find out what these kids' stones are about.
All right, let's go to another really cool ACC-SEC in-state rivalry, which is Kentucky going on the road to Louisville. Kentucky, sort of a disappointing season by preseason standards. They're 6-5 right now. Louisville has blown everyone away. They're 10-1. But this is always a close game, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Kentucky can, ruin Louisville's hopes. I mean, you just look back, and if you're Louisville, I mean, damn, man, we don't lose to Pitt, a terrible Pitt team on the road. We're talking about Louisville having a chance. Speaking about Louisville backdooring their way into the playoffs. But here's why I think Louisville is different this year, and I think it's one of the biggest credits that I can give to Coach Brom, who I believe should win one of the 18 Coach of the Year awards that we have, obviously. But when I look at this Louisville team, they're gritty. They're tough. They lined up against Notre Dame and hit them right in the teeth. This isn't Lamar Jackson Louisville, where we beat you 55-50 and we just try and turn it into a basketball game and see if we can outscore you. They are a downhill run team that runs play action, that runs a sophisticated system under Brom, that plays defense. This is 2 straight years now, and I know Brom's only been there for 1, where Louisville's defense is overachieved. But they're overachieving in a different way this year. They're more complete. Last year it's because they got in the backfield a lot. I think they were top 10 in sacks in the country as a defense last year. They're really good across the board. And Kentucky is a box run team. That's who they are. They run and run power. They run and run counter. They run and run play action off of it. They're one of the highest level play action teams. The amount of times you run play action, that's Liam Cohen, the OC from Sean McVay that came from the Rams. That's why it was a bad matchup for Kentucky against Georgia, right? When everybody was saying, oh, Kentucky may beat Georgia. It's an awful matchup. I don't think they're going to be able to line up, and I love Ray Davis, and sit there and run power and counter in Louisville down their throat enough to where Devin Leary doesn't turn the ball over. Again, Blaine said it best last week. Which plumber are you going to get? You're going to get the plumber that shows up for 2 hours, he's in and out, does a great job, there's no more leak, or the plumber that shows up, says he forgot a screw, and you don't see him for 2 months. I think Louisville's too consistent. Got a big one against Florida State here at the end. Give me Louisville.
Blaine, who wins?
I think Louisville wins this game, but I think it's pretty close. I mean, one thing that scared me about this Louisville team last week was Miami did run the ball on them, and they beat them between the tackles. I mean, Mark Fletcher Jr. had 103 yards.
Miami's pretty
almost
good up
averaged 5 yards a carry, and Miami's pretty good up front, but I think Kentucky's pretty good up front too. And I think Ray Rice is an NFL back, and I think they're going to feed him this game. I really do. I think their quarterback from Kentucky, Devin Leary, has been playing better. You can't really go back and look at the South Carolina game, but you go back to weeks before that. He's been playing better than what he was at the beginning of the year. But Louisville, I just love what Brom does. I think Jamari Thrash is an NFL receiver. Mm-hmm. I think you have 2 really capable backs. And their defense does play physical. I think it's close. Rivalry game. I wouldn't expect anything other different, but I think Louisville wins this game.
Steve, Kentucky started 5-0. They've lost 5 of their last 6. Who wins the game?
I like Kentucky. And sometimes with college football, you're dealing with tradition, legacies, history, and emotion. Doesn't it just look weird to see a Louisville 11-1? That just looks weird. Mm-hmm. Okay, you know why it's weird? It's just not. They're not about that life. It's not who they are. And you look at the last 2 weeks. Miami, in the most Miami thing ever, catches a Hail Mary at the end of the game on the 5.
Yeah.
And then the previous week, I mean, they did not look great against Virginia, who has gotten better as the year has gone on, but still is not a great football team. That's what happens when the air is thinner than what you are accustomed to, and you start and you're in the midst of that breakthrough, and man, it gets harder and harder to keep it going. You're coming off. I mean, I know it's an in-state rivalry, but you just had a very emotional game. You have the ACC championship the next week. This is the kind of thing Mark Stoops got himself the best contract in all of college football for moments like this. I just win 1 or 2 meaningful games a year and 7 wins. I keep you occupied until basketball starts.
That's exactly
and
right.
I've got a rollover contract that I could coach here for life if I want. And this would make the entirety of Kentucky's season. And I think that they will. I don't think Louisville is explosive enough on the outside. They're actually a better running team this year.
They are.
I think Kentucky will get them to play in the mosh pit, and that's exactly what Kentucky wants.
Everything in my gut tells me that Steve is right. Like Kentucky coming in, playing spoiler to this. I've taken Louisville several times throughout the season. I've been wrong each time. A big reason I've been wrong is because of the defense that they play over there. And that defense is headed up by a guy I played for at Michigan, defensive coordinator Ron English. That's the strong side of the football for them. And I'm going to go with Louisville for that and see if we can get this epic matchup with Florida State here, see how the ACC shakes out. Let's go to the Iron Bowl.
Yes.
I don't need to say anything other than that.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, Alabama is a much more talented team than Auburn is. Nobody's done that. Auburn has one blue chip 4-star starting on offense compared to Alabama, who's got more stars than, the Hubble telescope seen during its tenure. Jordan Hare is obviously a crazy place to play. We've seen crazy things happen there before. Just in my gut, I feel like the 14.5 number is a huge number. I like Auburn to cover the 14.5, even if it's a backdoor late touchdown to make it look closer than it was if it does go haywire. But this Auburn team is embarrassed after what happened against New Mexico State the week before, where they were soundly beaten. And to be honest with you, New Mexico State looked like the better team. I don't care what anybody says. But it's amazing what embarrassment can do for an 18 to 22-year-old. But embarrassment can only hold up for a while. Eventually, gravity overtakes you. You got all the emotion at home, trying to make up for how you embarrassed the program and stuff like that. And again, I'm not saying they did it on purpose, but it is embarrassing when you lose New Mexico State. I feel like Auburn puts up a fight for a while, but eventually the talent of Alabama takes over. I think Alabama finds a way at the end, probably wins by 10 to 13 points. But I do like Auburn to cover, but I'm telling you, Hugh Freeze is the right guy for the job at Auburn. This is the worst team he will have at Auburn. This is the biggest disadvantage he will have going against Alabama for a while, because Hugh Freeze beat Nick Saban just about as much as anybody. I watched him beat him with Bo Wallace twice. So Auburn, I think, may even punch first, right? You got nothing to lose. I think Alabama's got too much talent, man. Gravity's a real thing.
Yeah, my ass ain't sitting up here and picking up Alabama. I don't give a damn how good they are. I'll go down with a sinking ship any time of the day. Look, Auburn's obviously not talented. This game is weird. You lost to New Mexico State, that's fine. But I think they're going to show up, and I think there's a lot when you get disrespected, and I think Auburn got disrespected. You just didn't lose that game. You got disrespected. They beat you in every facet of the game. You didn't sniff the red zone versus New Mexico State. I think, Hugh, you got to pull everything out in your bag of tricks. This is a game. You got to be Willy Wonka, all right? You have to have your tricks pulled out. Welcome to Halloween. Peyton Thorne, big day on the ground, all right? And I think Jalen Monroe makes a couple mistakes. War Eagle, Bama, you can take that somewhere else.
Steve?
I think the line is a trap, and I think they're begging you to take Alabama. I mean, Auburn just got cold smoked by the Fighting Jerry Kills last week at home. And one of the most embarrassing losses in the program's history. He paid nearly $2 million to get humiliated like that. And it's the week before Alabama, and Alabama's coming on, and Jalen Milroe for Heisman is actually a thing right now. And there's talk about the SEC getting 2 teams in again. I think the average sports bettor is going to look at that and say, well, Auburn lost to New Mexico State and Alabama's killing people. They only have to cover by 2 touchdowns. I mean, they went to Kentucky and beat them by like 30 just 2 weeks ago. I think that is the odds makers are scared of everything you just heard. Situationally and what rivalries mean. And so for that reason, here's the weird thing. If the line was 21, I'd actually lay it. Okay. But because the line is only 14, that tells me that, man, they're trying to beg people to to put down money on Alabama here. So I'm going to go the other way with Auburn.
Wow, I love to hear it. Preseason, the combination of a new quarterback for Alabama, new tackle, a new offensive coordinator, combined with Hugh Freeze being in his first year and this game being in Jordan Hare, where we see weird stuff happen all the time, led me to picking Auburn in my preseason predictions. And I didn't hear the end of that from the wife for sure.
I was proud.
But the way that this team, and Jalen Milroe specifically, has responded since being benched against South Florida after multiple turnovers in a double-digit loss against Texas at home, the way they've responded has truly been incredible. They already have a date locked in with Georgia in the SEC championship game. I'm going to go with Alabama in the Iron Bowl, but 2 touchdowns, the way I've watched this game play out over the last decade, 2 touchdowns is insane, especially when you talk about TJ Finley took this game to 4 overtimes or something crazy like that. So either way, I hope we're in for an epic showdown, and I hope the same thing for the next game, which is the game of the day, Michigan, Ohio. Not much more needs to be said. It'll be the second time in a row we've seen these teams meet in as undefeated foes, which is the first time in history, in 3 straight years as top 5 in the matchups. Playoff implications here. Jim Harbaugh won't be on the sidelines like we talked about. Who are you going to take?
I'm going to be brief on this. Obviously, you two are connected to this rivalry. I will say this though. I think Michigan is the old saying in Batman that we saw: you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. I think they're slowly embracing the villain role. I'm talking about the team, not the administration. I think Jim Harbaugh is too. Here's what I think. I think deep down, Ohio State is scared of Michigan because of who Michigan's become. Michigan's become a bully. Michigan went from the little kid they used to push around in the playground to all of a sudden you come back during the summer, he's grown 6 inches, put on 25 pounds, and now he's pushing you around. That's what I think it is. And I think now, going into the big house with a quarterback that's not very experienced, obviously, in this game against one that is, I've described this Michigan team as smushy. That's what I think they are. Not in the bad way, but in the good way. They smush you overtime. I think Ohio State, as good as they are on defense, deep down in places they don't want to talk about with Ryan Day, they're a finesse team. I think they're more finesse than what Michigan is, and I know what plays in college football. I like Michigan. I like Michigan big at home, David. Big at home, double-digit win for Michigan. A lot of momentum to go beat the Little Giants in the Big Ten championship game next week.
Yeah, I don't think Ohio State's scared of them. I think Michigan's just better. I think they're just a better football team. And yeah, that starts up where? That starts up front. At the end of the day, yeah, Ohio State, their defensive line is pretty good, but look at those monsters Michigan has running around. And J.J. McCarthy seems to do what in big games? He seems to show up, and I think his legs will be the difference in this game. And I don't think Kyle McCord's good enough to throw Ohio State to a win, so give me Michigan.
All right, Steve, preach.
So to me, the key matchup in this game is which team is able to adequately pressure the other team's quarterback or not need to be concerned about this. If you look at Kyle McCord's splits, when he's not under pressure, you're dealing with a top 10 QBR in the country. When he is under pressure, he is outside the top 100 in QBR in the country. That is the most stark contrast of any quarterback in the entire sport. The problem that Michigan has right now is J.J. McCarthy is dealing with an injury that has impacted his mobility. It was a hit that he took against Penn State. You didn't see almost any back. They tried it at the very end, and then he overthrew the guy. But you saw very little back to the line of scrimmage play action last week against Maryland. Very limited offensive package trying to preserve him for this. I have a hard time, at the other hand, I cannot believe Ryan Day would lose to a team that doesn't have a coach.
Yeah.
And I can't believe he could survive doing that. I mean, the only one time I think since it became a rivalry has somebody gotten away with losing 3 in a row to Michigan and not lost their job, and that was John Cooper. But in this case, if you're Ryan Day, you lose 3 in a row, and the third one is to a team with no coach. I mean, I could see that administration saying, hey, you might want to see if the Chargers are interested. Okay. So I'm going to take Ohio State because I did it last year, and it's what I sincerely thought would happen, and it worked out great. and so I'm going to superstitiously do it again. I do agree with the analysis that styles make fights. And there's a saying basically, I don't know how true it is, that Michigan designed its program to beat Ohio State, and Ohio State designed its program to win national championships. And so the weather, by the way, looks very 2021. You're looking at temperatures in the low to mid 30s, snow in the forecast. Okay. And it does remind me of 2018 in reverse. In 2018, Ohio State had all that controversy, as I mentioned a little while ago, around Urban. They should have lost to Maryland the week before. Michigan was considered the team on more solid ground all year long. Michigan was a 4-point favorite in that game, just as it opened in this game. And then Ohio State took all that emotion of that entire year and all the stuff they took on and off the field and channeled into that game and just destroyed Michigan. I would love to see that again, but because picking Ohio State last year worked so well for me, I'm going to do it again.
God, I respect it.
Golly, Steve, I love it. You did that on this show a year ago. I love where your head's at. The last thing I'll add is just that I'm so proud to have had a small part in this rivalry. I didn't throw any touchdown passes. I didn't run any touchdowns. I wasn't a significant factor in any of the games. But to have had a small part in this, from someone whose mother was born in Columbus, Ohio, to be able to, have been in the room for Bo Schembechler's last speech the night before he died, to be on the field, for Lloyd Carr's last game the day before he retired. I'm really proud of that fact. And there's been a lot of respect between both of these programs over the years. You don't see so much of that right now with all that's come out over the course of this season. There's a lot of vitriol, but at the end of the day, that's all going to fade away at high noon on Saturday. We're going to lock the gates and we're going to find out, and it's going to be the best football game of the year. I truly believe that, and I'm happy that this game is back to being on the national scale and having national implications with the college football playoff. So give me the Michigan Wolverines. Go blue. I can't wait for Saturday.
Man, I can't either. And again, I think it's fantastic. We can have these arguments, us being from Auburn. You haven't played at Michigan, which is the greatest rivalry. And the truth is they're both fantastic. They're both amazing rivalries for different reasons and similar reasons. But we can't wait to watch it. Steve, it's always great to talk football with you, man. You're obviously very astute in watching it. You're a student of the game like we are. The Steve Deace Show, it's incredible work you guys are doing over there at Blaze. Nefarious. Man, it was so good, Steve. It was so good. I watched it with my wife, who wasn't my wife then, but she's my wife now. Absolutely fantastic, man. Tell everybody again where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, just follow me. Best thing to do is follow me on Twitter or X at Steve Deace Show there, and tell your wife I said thank you. By the way, a week from Friday, I head down to Dallas. We begin storyboarding the sequel for Nefarious.
Really? Hey, congrats. Congrats. Well, if anybody can make a sequel as good as the beginning, it's this man right here, Steve Deace. Steve, hey, enjoy I hope you enjoyed Thanksgiving yesterday. Enjoy the football watching. It's going to be a hell of a weekend, man. We really appreciate you joining us.
You got it, guys. Anytime. Same to you. God bless.
Definitely. And make sure you subscribe. Thank you guys for joining us. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe out there. And I'm glad you woke up from that nap.